Mirem was a beautiful woman, known for her charm and ambition. She married Kato, a humble man who loved her deeply. However, life was hard for them. Kaito worked tirelessly, but he could never provide the wealth that Mirem desired. They lived in a small village where they struggled to make ends meet. Over time, Mirem grew frustrated with their poverty and began to resent Kato for not being able to give her the life she dreamed of. One day, a wealthy businessman named Tembo came into their lives. He had everything Mirem wanted: money, power, and a life of luxury. Tembo saw Mirem's beauty and charm and immediately took an interest in her. He promised her a life of comfort, something she could never have with Kaito. Tembo's wealth and status made Mirem besought, longed for a life of ease and indulgence. Mirem, overwhelmed by the temptation of wealth, made a life-changing decision. She left Kaito and their 6 daughters behind and ran away with Tembo. Kato was devastated when he learned of her departure. He couldn't believe that his wife, the woman he loved, had abandoned him and their children for a life of luxury. But he didn't have time to wallow in grief. He knew he had to take care of their daughters, so he focused on raising them to be strong, independent women. Kato's life wasn't easy. He worked long hours, but he was determined to give his daughters a better future. He taught them the values of hard work, honesty, and kindness. Despite his struggles, Kaito was content, knowing that he was doing the best he could for his daughters. They grew up under his care, and they loved him dearly for his sacrifices. Meanwhile, Mirem's life with Tembo was everything she had dreamed of. They traveled the world, lived in a mansion, and enjoyed the finest things in life. But as the years passed, Mirem began to feel lonely. Tembo, though wealthy, was often distant, and the life she had once yearned for no longer brought her happiness. She missed her daughters, but her pride kept her from reaching out to them. After 25 years, Mirem heard rumors that her daughters had become successful and that Kaito was doing well in his own right. Her curiosity grew, and she decided to visit her old village. When she returned, she learned that Kaito had built a life for himself and his daughters. Kaito had become wealthy in his own way, and his daughters had grown into strong, successful women. Mirem's heart ached as she realized the price of her decisions. She had traded love and family for wealth, but she had lost so much in the process. Now Mirembe must face the consequences of her choices. She longs to reconnect with her daughters, but she knows it may be too late. The story of her betrayal has already spread, and she fears they may never forgive her. Will Mirem find redemption, or will her past mistakes haunt her forever? Kaito, though heartbroken by his wife's abandonment, never gave up. He could have fallen into despair, but instead, he made a promise to himself. He would take care of their daughters, no matter how hard it was. Kaito knew that his daughters depended on him, and he wasn't going to let them suffer. Even though he was poor, he worked every day, from sunrise to sunset, to provide for them. His determination was unmatched. Kaito's life was a constant struggle. He didn't have much, but what he did have, he shared with his daughters. He worked as a farmer and did odd jobs around the village to make ends meet. He always put food on the table and made sure his daughters had clothes to wear. They didn't have the luxury of other children in the village, but Kaito made sure they never went to bed hungry. He taught them to value hard work and to never rely on others for their happiness. Despite the hardships, Kaito never let his daughters see him in despair. He hid his pain and carried on, always smiling for their sake. The girls admired their father's strength and resilience. They knew their mother had left him, but they never let it define them. Kaito raised them to be independent, to be strong, and to never feel sorry for themselves. As the years passed, the daughters grew older and began to make their way in the world. They went to school, learned new skills, and eventually found jobs in the village. Each daughter had a dream of her own, and Kaito supported them every step of the way. He wanted them to be better than he had ever been, and he was willing to sacrifice everything for their future. Kaito never spoke ill of Mirem to his daughters. He never told them how their mother had abandoned them for a life of wealth. He didn't want them to hate her. Instead, he told them that sometimes life makes difficult choices, and people make mistakes. He believed in forgiveness, but he also wanted his daughters to know the value of loyalty, hard work, and love. Although Kato's life was not easy, he found comfort in the love and respect of his daughters. They were his reason to keep going. With each passing day, Kaito grew prouder of them. They were all smart, strong, and capable young women, and they were determined to build their own futures. Kato's success was not measured by money or possessions, but by the love and respect he had earned from his daughters. They were his true wealth, and he knew that no matter what happened, they would always be there for him. His heart swelled with pride as he watched them grow into the women he had always dreamed they would be. Mirem's life with Tembo was everything she had hoped for and more. She had finally achieved the wealth and luxury she had longed for. They lived in a grand mansion, surrounded by servants and expensive items. Tembo treated her to exotic vacations, fine jewelry, and extravagant parties. It was the life Mirem had dreamed about when she left Kato behind. But as the years went on, Mirem began to feel an emptiness that she couldn't ignore. Tembo, though kind and generous, was always busy with his business. He would often travel for work, leaving Mirem alone in their grand home. The luxury that once seemed so wonderful began to feel like a cage. Mirem started to realize that wealth, though it could buy everything material, couldn't fill the void in her heart. She had traded love for riches, and now she wondered if it had been worth it. Mirem tried to distract herself with shopping, traveling, and attending glamorous events, but nothing seemed to bring her happiness. She often found herself thinking of Kato and her daughters, especially when she saw families spending time together. She remembered how Kato had always been there for her, even though he didn't have much. He had loved her in a way Tembo never could. At night, when Tembo was away on business trips, Mirem would lie awake, thinking of her daughters. She hadn't seen them in years, and the thought of them growing up without her weighed heavily on her heart. She had abandoned them without a second thought, choosing a life of luxury over the family that once meant everything to her. But as the years passed, Mirem began to wonder if she could ever mend the relationship she had broken. Mirem's guilt grew stronger with each passing year. She saw her daughter's success from a distance, hearing rumors of their achievements and how well they were doing, but she never reached out to them. Her pride held her back. She didn't know how to face them after what she had done. She feared that they would hate her, and the idea of facing their anger was too much for her to bear. As time passed, Mirem realized that her wealth and comfort were no longer enough. The emptiness she felt couldn't be filled with material things. She missed her daughters, and she missed Kato, despite everything. The love she had once taken for granted now felt like a distant memory. She couldn't help but wonder what her life could have been if she had stayed with Kato and built a life with him and their children. But the past was behind her, and she had no idea how to undo the mistakes she had made. Now, at the age of 50, Mirem was faced with a choice. Should she try to reconnect with her daughters? Should she try to apologize and ask for forgiveness? Or was it too late? Would they even want her back in their lives after all that had happened? Kato, on the other hand, had no idea that Mirem was regretting her decision to leave him. He had moved on with his life, focusing on raising his daughters and building a future for them. He never sought revenge for her abandoning him. Instead, he poured all his energy into being the best father he could be. Over the years, Kato had managed to build a successful business. It wasn't a large fortune, but it was enough to live comfortably and ensure his daughters had everything they needed. Kato's business grew slowly but steadily, and his daughters played a large role in its success. They had all inherited their father's work ethic and determination. Each of them had a different path, but they all ended up successful in their own way. One became a doctor, another started a fashion business, while the others worked in various fields, always striving to do better than their circumstances. They were proud of the way their father had raised them, and the bond between them was stronger than anything money could buy. The daughters, however, never forgot the woman who had abandoned them. They had grown up hearing their father's stories about their mother, and although Kato never spoke badly of her, the pain of her betrayal was still felt by them all. They had heard rumors about Mirem's life, about the wealth she had gained by marrying Tembo, but none of them could bring themselves to be angry at Kato for forgiving her. Instead, they all made a vow to themselves that no matter what happened, they would always be there for their father. As the years passed, Kato's daughters became successful women, and they each began their own families. Kato watched with pride as his daughters found happiness, but they couldn't help but wonder about the woman who had walked away from it all. He never reached out to Mirem, even when he learned that she had been trying to reconnect with them. His pride wouldn't allow it, but deep inside, he still loved her. He just couldn't forgive the hurt she had caused their daughters, and they couldn't forget how she had left them when they were most in need. Kato's heart had healed over the years, but there was still a part of him that wished things had turned out differently. He had given up on ever seeing Mirem again, but fate had other plans. As the family's wealth grew, Kato had become a respected figure in their village. People looked up to him not for his wealth, but for his character. He had been through so much, yet he had never lost his dignity or kindness. Kato had built a legacy based on love, sacrifice, and hard work. But one day, he heard a rumor that changed everything. Mirem was back in town, and she was searching for her daughters. Kaido's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know what to think. Should he encourage his daughters to forgive her, or should he protect them from the pain of their past? He couldn't make the decision for them, but he knew that it was time to face the ghosts of the past. Mirem, after hearing so much about the success of her daughters, could no longer ignore the urge to reconnect with them. She had everything she'd ever dreamed of: wealth, luxury, and a life of ease. But nothing filled the emptiness she felt inside. The guilt for abandoning her children and husband weighed heavily on her heart. She regretted the decision she had made all those years ago. She had traded love and family for material possessions, and now she realized that she had lost something far more precious. She decided it was time to face the consequences of her actions. She needed to see her daughters, to apologize, and to make things right. She didn't know how they would react, but she couldn't keep running from her past. She reached out to them, hoping for forgiveness, but also understanding that they might never accept her back into their lives. Mirem traveled back to the village where she had left Kato and the girls. It had been many years since she had last seen them, and she wasn't sure what to expect. As she arrived in the village, she saw the changes in the place. The once small and poor village had grown into a thriving community. The roads were paved, new buildings were erected, and there was a sense of prosperity in the air. Mirem wondered if Kato had been behind some of these changes, but she didn't have time to think about that. She was here for one purpose only: to find her daughters. Mirem went to the places where she thought her daughters might be. She went to the doctor's clinic, where one of them worked, the fashion shop where another one had a business, and the places where the other daughters had their lives. But each time she asked about them, she was met with cold stares and reluctance. The villagers were hesitant to speak about Kaito's daughters, but it didn't take long for Mirem to realize that her return was not a welcome one. Finally, she went to Kato's house, where she knew the daughters would gather. She felt nervous, unsure of what to expect. Kato was there, older now, but still the same kind-hearted man who had raised his daughters with love and dedication. Mirem stood at the door, hesitating. She had no idea how to face him, the man she had abandoned all those years ago. She had so many things to say, but she wasn't sure if he would listen. Kaito saw her standing at the door and felt a rush of emotions. For a moment, it was as if time had stood still. He had never forgotten Mirem, but he had come to terms with the life he had built without her. His daughters were strong and independent, and they didn't need their mother's approval or love. But Kaito had always hoped that one day, things could be different. Mirem stepped forward and, with trembling hands, knocked on the door. Kato opened it, and they locked eyes. Neither of them knew what to say, but the weight of the years between them was felt in that silence. It was the moment that would define their future. Mirem stood there, facing Kato, unsure of what to say. She had prepared herself for this moment for so long, but now that she was here, words failed her. Kato, on the other hand, remained calm, though his heart was filled with mixed emotions. He had never forgotten the woman who had left him and their daughters. But seeing her again after all these years brought up feelings of pain, anger, and also some longing for the past. Kato took a deep breath and spoke first, his voice steady but firm. "Why are you here, Mirem?" he asked, not with anger, but with the calmness of a man who had learned to let go of the past. "After all these years, why come back now?" Mirem, tears filling her eyes, struggled to find the words. She had thought about this moment so many times, but nothing could prepare her for the reality of it. I was wrong, Kato," she said softly. "I left you. I left our children. I thought I could find happiness with wealth, but I was wrong. I've never stopped thinking about you all. I was selfish, and now I regret it." Kato looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. He could see the sincerity in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. He had moved on. He had raised their daughters, given them everything they needed, and built a life of his own. His heart no longer ached for her. That the hurt still lingered in the back of his mind. "I'm not angry anymore," Kato said quietly. I forgave you a long time ago, but that doesn't change what happened. My daughters, they had to grow up without you. They had to learn how to live without a mother, and that's something I can never change for them. Miriam's heart broke as she realized the full weight of what she had done. Kaito was right. Her absence had shaped their daughters' lives in ways she could never undo. The pain of knowing she could never give them back the mother they deserved was unbearable. She asked to see her daughters, hoping that somehow, after all these years, they would want to forgive her. Kaito agreed, though he didn't know if his daughters would welcome her with open arms. They had grown up strong, independent, and proud of the life their father had given them. They were not children anymore, and their feelings about their mother were complex. Miriam waited anxiously as Kato went to fetch their daughters. When they arrived, they stood in front of her, their faces unreadable. The silence between them was heavy, as the years of abandonment and hurt couldn't be erased with a simple apology. Miriam could see the anger in their eyes, but she also saw a glimpse of something else. A longing, perhaps, for the mother they had never had. One of the daughters, Amina, spoke first. Why now? She asked, her voice cold but controlled. Why should we forgive you after all these years? You chose your wealth over us. You left us when we needed you most. Miriam felt as though the ground beneath her feet had crumbled. She had hoped for forgiveness, but the reality of facing her daughter's anger was more than she could bear. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, her voice breaking. But I had to try. I need you to know that I'm truly sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, and I can't undo what I did, but I would give anything to be a part of your lives again. The daughters exchanged glances, unsure of what to say. The wounds were deep, and though they could see the sincerity in their mother's words, it didn't change the past. They had lived their entire lives without her, and now, after all these years, they didn't know what role she could play in their lives. The silence in the room was heavy as Miriam waited for her daughter's response. She could see the pain in their eyes, the hurt that had built up over the years. Amina, the oldest, finally broke the silence. You think we can just forgive you like that? She asked, her voice a mix of anger and disbelief. You left us with nothing but memories of you abandoning us. You don't get to just come back and expect everything to be okay. Miriam's heart shattered at her daughter's words. She had hoped for understanding, for some sign that her apology could heal the wounds she had caused, but the truth was undeniable. Her daughters had been through so much without her, and now she realized that their pain was far deeper than she had imagined. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, Miriam said softly, her voice trembling, but I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. I made a mistake, a terrible one, but I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I was doing what was best for me, but in the end, I lost everything that mattered. The daughters exchanged glances, their emotions swirling. The years of resentment and pain were not so easily erased. They had lived without their mother, without the woman who should have cared for them. And now she was standing before them, asking for forgiveness. It was hard to process, hard to know how to feel. I'm not going to pretend that everything is fine, said Amina, the eldest daughter. You can't just come back into our lives and make everything better. But we're not the same little girls who needed you to take care of us. We've learned to live without you. Miriam's eyes filled with tears. She finally understood she had no right to ask for her daughter's forgiveness after leaving them for so long. She couldn't just walk back into their lives as if nothing had happened. The daughters stood quietly, their expressions guarded. Their father, Kato, had been the one who raised them, showing them what true love and devotion meant. Their hurt was still fresh. I don't expect you to forgive me now, Miriam said softly, but I hope one day we can start over. I'll be here when you're ready. She spent the next few days in the village, waiting. The daughters, led by the eldest, Amina, began to talk. We can't let our anger control us forever, Amina said. Slowly, they started visiting their mother, seeing her remorse. One evening, Kaito finally spoke. I don't know if I can forget what happened, he said, his voice steady. But if my daughters are willing to try, then I will support them. For me, it was a glimmer of hope that they could rebuild the family they had lost. Time ticked by, and Miriam's efforts to reconnect with her daughters started to show tiny glimmers of hope. It was a difficult journey for everyone. Her daughters had grown up without her, learning to depend solely on their father. But deep down, A part of them still longed for the mother they once knew, the one who had promised them forever. It was this tiny spark that gave Miriam a second chance, even though trust was still a long way off. The daughters began visiting, but each visit was tense, like a test. They needed to see if their mother had truly changed. Amina, the eldest, was the most guarded. She kept her distance, watching for consistency in Miriam's actions before she'd even consider opening her heart again. Miriam understood. She knew she couldn't just waltz back in and pretend the years of pain never happened. She had to prove her commitment. One day, she had an idea. She invited her daughters to join a community project, something their father, Cato, had always cared about. It was her way of showing she was serious about making amends, not just for herself, but for the community that had once embraced her. The daughters were hesitant, but Cato encouraged them. "This is a chance for all of us," he said, "to build something better." Working side by side, something magical began to shift. They saw their mother in a new light. Miriam wasn't making excuses. She was just there, present, listening to their stories and offering support. The walls around their hearts started to crumble. They saw she was genuinely trying. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant giving someone a chance to prove they had changed. One evening, Amina spoke up. "I've been thinking," she said softly. "Maybe it's time to let go of the anger and try to move forward." It wouldn't be easy, but they all knew holding on to the past was only holding them back. Kaito looked at Miriam, his eyes kindled. "It's up to you to prove you can be part of this family again." Over the next few months, Miriam did just that. Siso weighed up day after day, proving her love through her actions. The pain of the past wasn't gone, but it no longer defined them. They were finding their way back to each other, rebuilding what was broken. It was a new beginning, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the unbreakable bonds of family. Thanks for watching. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe for more content that warms the heart.